All Hit Radio.
Welcome to the X Zone, a place where fact is fiction and fiction is reality. Now, here's your host, Rob McConnell.
And welcome back to the X Zone, everyone. My name is Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide, toll-free 800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X Zone Radio TV. And our main website, where you can listen to the X Zone 724, 365. www.xzoneradiotv.com. Just a few days ago, there was a massive blizzard scare that went through the eastern seaboard. New York City missed the big bullet just by a couple of miles, and yet other parts of the state of New York were just buried in snow. Not as much snow as they had in Buffalo a couple of months ago, but still Boston got nailed and other parts of the eastern seaboard United States. And people took their time. The government took necessary precautions. And I was thinking about Matthew Stein, who is the author of two great books, When Technology Fails and When Disaster Strikes. We've had the pleasure of having Matthew on the show many times before. He's always enlightening, educational, entertaining. And for more information about Matthew, his website is www.whentechfails.com. Joining us now from the mountains of the western United States is Matthew Stein. And Matthew, welcome back to the X Zone. Great seeing you, my friend.
Oh, it's a real pleasure to be on the show, and it's nice to be doing a video interview this time, so I get to see you and you get to see me. Quite a pleasant surprise.
I don't know how to take that. A pleasant surprise. So what you're saying
just
is
a new change. Something different.
I thought maybe you were expecting me to have three heads, purple hair, and green eyes. Oh,
well,
wait.
you are in the X Zone. I mean, you should, shouldn't you? I would think.
I think I just described one of my ex-girlfriends from high school, but that's another story for another time. Matthew, I'm sure you, like everyone else, was watching the weather maps and just seeing how heavy the East Coast was going to get hit. If that same situation had been heading your way, how would you have prepared for it?
Well, I wish it was heading my way, because where I live is in Lake Tahoe, near Donner Pass, where the Donner Party had their infamous barbecue 150 years ago when Aunt May got popped in the pot. And unfortunately, we're supposed to. Like, the amount of snow they were predicting is a normal, average, everyday, ho-hum Sierra snowstorm.
Get out of here.
And we wish we were having those. On last Sunday, I was on the beach in Lake Tahoe at 6,200-foot elevation, and when I should have been powder skiing at Heavenly Valley a few miles away, or one of the other places, I was sitting on the beach with my skimpy running shorts and no shirt, and for several hours, and felt great. And in fact, it was a clothing optional beach, so I had more clothing on than most of the people on the beach that day. And,
whoa!
And none of us were cold.
Wait a second. Clothing optional beach.
Yes, yeah. Lake Tahoe, listed in one of the world's best nudie beaches, but. I was, like I said, I was on a corner away from the main crowd, and I was just kind of hanging out there and with my friend, and, we had a little bit of clothing on, not much, but a little bit.
I could take this...
But it's January in Tahoe. It should have been like 20 degrees and 10 feet of snow on the ground, but it wasn't.
I could take this conversation a whole different way, but I'm not going to, because number one, what you have to say about your two books and your expertise... is very important. Oh, what in the name of heavens was that, Craig? That was the sound effect of Matthew at Lake Tahoe with not enough clothes on. Gotcha.
That's going into the cold water. Yes, with not enough clothes on. I mean, the air was warm, but I threw a stick for my dog, and it landed on top of a rock. And I waded out. She was like whimpering around and swimming around trying to get up on the rock.
Right.
So I waded out to get it, and that was really, really cold. My legs hurt really bad. I had a lot of sympathy for those people on the Titanic when they went into ice cold water like that. I mean, my legs hurt after 30 seconds.
Matthew, you and I have to take a commercial break, my good friend, and we'll be back with my guest this hour, Matthew Stein, after this 2-minute commercial break. And if you'd like more information about Matthew, his website is www.whentechfails.com, and Matthew is the author of When Technology Fails and When Disaster Strikes. 1-800-610-7035 worldwide, toll-free. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and of course our website where you can listen to the X-Zone 724 365, www.xzoneradiotv.com. We'll be back on the other side of this 2-minute commercial break. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. This is the X-Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Worldwide, toll-free, 800-610-7035. Email xzone@xzoneradiotv.com. On all major social media sites, X-Zone Radio TV, and our main website where you can listen to the X-Zone Radio Show 724 365. You can go into our archives. You can watch some of the videos that we're producing. And of course, now you can also link up to Simul TV and other networks that we're affiliated with, both radio and television. My guest this hour is a good friend of mine, Matthew Stein. He is somewhere in Colorado, right?
No, I'm in California. 15 miles from the Nevada border, in the town of Truckee, in the high Sierras, where the infamous Donner Party had their really rough winter 150 years ago.
So, as I was asking you before I got sidetracked with your nudism, I mean with your nearly going nude on this beach, where clothing is optional, and I'm just pulling your leg there, no pun intended. I asked you what you would have done, Matt Stein, the author of When Technology Fails and When Disaster Strikes. How would have you prepared for such a blizzard that they were expecting to hit the eastern seaboard, that, thank good Lord, many cities were saved? How would you have prepared?
Well, you need to be ready in a situation like that to be in your car for a significant period of time. If you have to drive, just expect or plan on the possibility of being stuck for many hours. Or in your home, both in your car and in your home, you need to basically be clothed and have some food and supplies so that you can handle the temperature in your car, in your home, dropping to be equal to the temperatures outside.
Right.
So that means that you need to be able to winterize your pipe if you get the potential for a long-term power outage, because unless you've got a wood stove or a propane heater that doesn't require electricity, or a generator to help run your heater,
right,
then the temperature, your furnace won't run, and the electricity won't go, and so your temperatures inside gradually equal the temperature outside. So, like for instance, in the ice storm in the Northeast, there were places in Canada that were out of power for up to 3 weeks. There was so many snapped poles and snapped trees and lines down.
Yeah, you should have seen the structural steel towers that were just bent over like they were made of tin cans. Yeah,
it was pretty amazing. And the town I grew up in, Burlington, Vermont, they had this tree-lined streets where 3 out of 4 of those gorgeous old maples just snapped.
Yeah.
The weight of the ice, they just snapped them, and when they snapped, they brought down the power lines too. So in those situations, you have to be ready to have backup source of heat, hopefully. And in the event that your backup source runs out or fails or you don't have one, you have to be able to shelter in your home or in your vehicle at temperatures that approach the temperatures outside.
Now, Matt, you and I are talking tonight. You're in California. I'm in Ontario, Canada. And in between us are millions of people. And I would guess, with my best guesstimate, that less than 5% of those millions know what to do in case of an impending disaster.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that 5% is like way more than people who know what to do.
Wow.
That's 1 in 20. And I do provide, like in the book When Disaster Strikes, the more recent one, there's chapters on very specific threats. So there's a chapter on earthquakes, a chapter on surviving in the cold without heat and power. And a lot of people don't have any clue how to drain their pipes of water. Now, for instance, and most of us will never have to do that. But if you have a situation where your home is dropped down to 10 degrees or 5 degrees, and you don't drain those pipes, then all of the pipes are going to freeze. They're going to split. Most of your fixtures in your home will split, and pipes inside your wall will split. And when the water does thaw out and start flowing again, it's going to flood your home out and could ruin it by filling it with toxic mold, and just flooding everything and ruining wood floors and carpets and sheetrock and and if it molds, it could make your house like uninhabitable. So it's the sort of situation which hopefully never happens, but the consequences of it happening, if you're don't know what to do, are so serious you could lose your entire home. And so in the chapter on surviving the extreme heat and the extreme cold without heat or power, I show people how to crack your faucets, drain the water out of a low place, how to winterize those toilets and winterize the traps in your home so that they don't freeze and split. And that's information that makes sense, and plumbers will know it, and a few handymen will know it, but the average person by a long shot has no clue what to do. It's pretty simple stuff. It's not rocket science. It's just most people don't have any clue when it comes to that.
I think a lot of people depend on other people to take care of those little jobs, but if the weather is very bad and that person can't get to your house to do what he usually does, you could be in for a lot of trouble, not only to mention with the loss of property, but financial loss as well. Oh,
yeah. I just dodged the bullet on that a few years back. My wife and I had been down in Santa Cruz during an unusually warm spell, kind of like what we're having right now.
Yeah.
Warm and sunny, and we brought our trailer down and we're hanging out on the beach in the ocean, and it was like 70 to 80 degrees in the sun out of the wind, and 60 degrees inland a little. And then it changed from record hot in middle of January to record cold, and people's pipes were freezing all around the Bay Area where it usually doesn't freeze very much, and a lot of the towns a little bit inland but not far inland, they were splitting pipes. So my wife said, let's go home, I'm not feeling well. I said, you sure it's going to be like well below zero at home, and you sure you don't want to just stay in the warmth? She said, no, I gotta go home, I'm just not feeling well, I'm coming down with something. So we got home and stepped in our front door, and the instant I stepped in the front door, I was like, whoa, something's really wrong in here. We'd left the furnace going, and it was ice cold. And it turned out that the igniter on my furnace that is an electronic igniter that starts the furnace electrically when it goes, had split.
Ooh.
In the when we were out of town and record cold had hit. So we came in and every plant in the house was frozen, and the faucets were frozen, and I took off the back of my toilet tank and I looked inside, and it was filled with daggers, like 12-inch long daggers of ice.
Oh my
in this
gosh.
three-dimensional sculpture of ice inside the toilet tank. And if we had come back the following morning like I'd suggested, every fixture, every pipe in the house would have split, and it would have just been, like a $50,000 bill. We would have had to rip walls apart and replace all the piping in the house. And luckily, we only lost the kitchen faucet. And I was able to go under the house and I pulled off a furnace hose and started the furnace with a hose going under the house to thaw all of the pipes under the house. And we just squeaked by and just dodged the bullet on that one. But that's the kind of situation that you could face in your home if you if you had a long-term power outage and you didn't have a source of heat that ran without electricity, or you didn't have a generator to make your furnace run or something like that. So I recommend you have a generator. I recommend you have backup sources of heat. I recommend you have kind of multiple levels of backups on things, and hope that day never comes when it's really serious and everything's down so long that everything runs out. That's a day I not looking forward to. I have a feeling it's coming for one reason or for one of several reasons, and I think I'll see it within my lifetime, but I haven't seen it yet, and I'm not looking forward to it.
With all these large storms that seem to be coming out of nowhere, historic storms, is this all part of global warming, or is this just a regular cycle that we're seeing happen, and we're just going through this cycle of time and cycle of weather, and it has nothing to do with anything else except it's Mother Nature?
Well, I personally believe the scientists.
Yeah.
There's still a 97% consensus amongst all peer-reviewed scientific papers about the climate, basically saying that, and even 97% says humans are changing the climate and are responsible. The 3%, most of them, some of them say they're not sure, they're not sure, and a few of them deny, say plainly that this is all natural and humans have nothing to do with it. But I tend to believe the 97% consensus in the scientists, and you're never going to find 100% consensus in anything. The indications are that we've destabilized the weather systems of the planet, and that means that air masses and things like the jet stream are changing. So, for instance, right now you're seeing the Arctic Ocean is ice-free for most of the year now in many locations.
Right.
Places like Greenland, I was just watching a film of a vet going around to the sled dogs that are starving because for the last 15 years, the people haven't been used their sled dogs to fish and hunt in the winter on the ice pack in Greenland. They just take their boats out because the ocean is so warm that it's not freezing in where their towns are like it used to every year for known history. It always froze, and now it's not. So those things are pretty hugely changing. The other thing that's happening is on the East Coast, the jet stream is tending to go down like this and bring colder weather to the East Coast, even though the average winter weathers are 20 degrees warmer than normal in northern Alaska and northern Canada. It's the air traffic is going different. And that same jet stream that's doing this is going around California, and so it's not bringing us the normal storms. I mean, on a heavy storm, we had a week in the mid-90s where at my house in Tahoe, we got 2 feet a day for a week.
Wow.
And they had 4 to 6 feet a day at the summit, 10 miles from my house at Donner Summit. So they had 30 feet of snow that week at Donner Summit, and we had 14 feet of snow at my house during that week. And this year, the most snow I've seen on the ground at my house has been 4 inches. That's been it. And it's like it's very strange, and I hope we have a heavy. Last winter we got some decent storms in the spring that helped save us from a devastating fire season in the summer, and this year we're in the same boat again as last year. We had a little more moisture in December, but January's looking just the same. So if we don't have a spring that pulls us out, we're gonna have a horrendous time in fire season.
Matthew, stand by. You and I have to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. Exonation Matthew Stein is my special guest. His website is www.whentechfails.com. And Matthew and I will be back after this news break. Don't go away. Welcome back, everyone. This is the X Zone. I am Rob McConnell. We're coming to you from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Now, you can find the X Zone Radio TV show on every major social media site. Once again, our handle is X Zone Radio TV. And if you'd like to listen to the X Zone 724 365, just go to www.xzoneradiotv.com. And don't forget, if you're out and about and you would like to call in and listen to the X Zone, 213-401-0080. That's by telephone, that's by iPad, that's by any form of portable handheld communication device or hardwired device, including Skype, at, ready for that? 213-401-0080. Matthew Stein is our guest, www.whentechfails. He's the author of When Technology Fails and a second book, When Disaster Strikes. And over the commercial break, Matthew, you and I were talking about a very interesting conversation you had over a beer with Stephen Schneider, and I'd love for you to, to share this with the listeners.
Yeah, a number of years ago, Stephen since passed from cancer, but he was the lead author of the IPCC international papers from scientists on global climate change. Mm-hmm. And I brought up the question that people are always saying, well, climate's always changed and we're just seeing a natural fluctuation. And he got pretty animated in giving me his answer. So he said that, yes, climate has always changed and fluctuated. In fact, there are some very complex calculations that astrophysicists can do to tell you when Saturn and Jupiter tend to line up to draw the Earth to a larger orbit away from the sun. Really? And you get a natural cooling trend during that period. And similarly, sometimes they line up to draw the Earth to an orbit that's closer to the sun, and we get a hotter period. Or we have periods where we have things like extreme volcanic activity or an asteroid impact that they believe caused a superheated period followed by a nuclear winter kind of thing that wiped out the dinosaurs 40 million years ago. So he said, yes, there's been lots of fluctuations, and we can attribute those to mostly to astrophysics types fluctuations that affect the Earth's orbit or solar fluctuations. But he said right now, none of those factors are happening. So he said, in his opinion, the changes we're seeing are due to man-made things. Now, other people have criticized him and said, well, in the 1970s, Mr. Schneider, you predicted a cooling trend and an ice age coming. And he said, yes, it's not a perfect science. In those days, they had overestimated the cooling effect of aerosols from pollutions. So what he found was that the pollution in the north was primarily in the northern hemisphere, and it settled out much faster than they expected. So it turns out that the cooling effect of aerosols from air pollution was roughly 50% or less than what they'd originally estimated. And they had underestimated the heating effects of greenhouse gases because they were primarily looking just at CO2. And it turned out that things like methanes and CFCs have an equal amount to CF2. So basically, they overestimated by a factor of 2 the cooling effect and underestimated by a factor of at least 2, somewhere more like 3 to 1 of the heating effect. So their earlier poor understanding of science led to a false prediction of a coming ice age. And as the science improves, they see more and more effects, and they're finding out that their earlier estimations of the heating was way off. Like, you would find predictions of where we'd be in 10 or 20 years happening 3 or 4 years later. So they're seeing a mix of things. Now, some people say, well, for the last 15 years, it reached this height, and last year was the record high temperatures for as long as we've been keeping records, but only by a tiny amount. And so the Earth so they're saying, maybe it's not really heating and all of that. But I speculate on this one, and I could be totally wrong, but I know there's chemtrails out there because you can look in the sky and see trails that just last and last, like never happened when you and I were young. Yeah. And you can see the difference between a chemtrail that just streaks across the sky and fades over an hour or two, or a contrail where a commercial jet's flying and its jet trail is kind of disappearing behind it as it goes across the sky. Now, I speculate because I'm not an expert on this, and I don't like to say anything emphatically unless I believe a source.
Sure.
That I believe they're probably spraying chemtrails in attempts to mitigate some of the effects of climate change. And so perhaps they've been able to sort of hold things steady, a little bit steady for the last 15 years through the use of chemtrails. So we're kind of holding steady at this record high temperatures. But I don't believe, if we keep unleashing greenhouse gases, I believe that, that temperature is going to keep rising in spite of any efforts to mitigate in terms of like chemtrails. Now, we can mitigate by getting rid of the greenhouse gases, but that involves like a giant change in the way humans do business on the earth and a huge investment in alternative energy, and which I think is great because there's no question we're going to eventually run out of these things we're burning to keep our society going, and I think the sooner we invest in alternatives, the better. Unfortunately, there's a huge amount of money outside of Apple Computer. The top 5 corporations for making the most money in the planet are all oil companies. And so there's, the top 5 most powerful companies in the world outside of Apple is oil companies, and they're not going to really be keen on us, putting them out of business in the near future.
Exactly. What effect does the lack of snow have on the cycle, the natural cycle that Mother Nature had so wisely incorporated into our seasons?
It has a huge effect. It's called a feedback effect in systems systems talk, engineering talk. So when you have lack of snow, then the snow is very reflective. It reflects a lot of the infrared heat back out to space that's coming in from the sun. So when you lose Arctic sea ice, then it goes into the ocean and it becomes a heat sink sucking it in rather than a reflector reflecting it out. So it's sort of a self-fulfilling feedback loop that tends to mean that the warmer it gets, the faster it continues to warm. And so places like the Arctic are warming much faster than down here. I mean, here we're seeing a minor, like a 1.5 degree change over the since 1960 or so. In the Arctic, you're seeing like a 20-degree change. Now, in the Antarctic, because it's got this giant land mass and doesn't have ocean, it's a whole continent, like as big as the United States in the Antarctic. So that land mass stabilizes that temperature, and you're not seeing the temperature fluctuations at the South Pole like you are at the North Pole in terms of warming. And so the South Pole ice pack is staying kind of the same, but the Greenland ice pack is radically melting. And if we lose the Greenland ice pack, that's 16 feet of ocean height change, which is enough to flood most of the coastal cities of the world. And I think 4 feet of ocean change is enough to wipe out all the rice fields in the floodplains in Asia and over most of the world, and it's enough to like wipe out Sacramento and Stockton, California. So so you're talking like if Greenland goes, that the whole Central Valley of California will be an inland sea again. So you're talking some really major climate shifts in population. You're talking millions and perhaps billions of people becoming they're going to have to leave where they live and go somewhere else. They'll be on the road and having to move. I mean, it's already happening in nations in the world that are in atolls. They're very low lying. They're starting to see the storm sweep over their islands, and they're figuring they're going to have to leave it. There's a great dive spot in the South Pacific that people are leaving, and they're planning on their whole country being gone in the near future.
Is it too late to turn everything around, or are we destined to see more disasters, more hot weather, more strange weather, and drought, more fires?
Right. We're destined to see all the above because there's a lag in systems talk again. The effects we're seeing now are mostly what from like 20 years ago. It's a long, slow thing. So if we stop producing greenhouse gases today, or cut them down to 20% of our today's levels, so we could maintain the 400 or 350 part per million, which we've already passed, that Bill McKibben says we need to maintain to prevent catastrophic climate change. If we were to keep the atmosphere at that level, we would still see effects changing for the next 20 to 30 years for where we are today. So my guess is that we're going to see catastrophic climate changes, and that are unavoidable at this point in time. What's avoidable is we have two paths. In other words, climate change is going to stabilize at a new level and then slowly change back, perhaps, to where it is now. And it's going to happen from one of two ways. It's going to happen either because we did nothing and most of the population of the world died as a result, and we also run out of burning fossil fuels because they're going to reach their end. And so that's the long, slow way back to a stable climate. Or the world's governments and people get up in arms and say, this is really serious, and we're just going to have to change the way we do business and make it a priority. Like defeating Hitler was a priority. If it was number 10 on the priority list, then we'd all be speaking German right now.
Sure.
We never would have stopped Hitler. They made it number one. In fact, Roosevelt came to the people in Detroit, the big five, manufacturers of its day, and he said to them, "Gentlemen, this is a do-or-die situation. Within a year, I don't want a single car being made for domestic production. I want everything to be 100% behind the war effort, or you're all going to be speaking German, and you're not going to be running your companies anymore." And they set targets which they thought were totally unachievable, that were just unachievable. And it turns out that they met every single target. And in 9 out of 10 targets, they not only met them, they far exceeded those targets. So that's the kind of effort and commitment it's going to take to roll back the climate change. And at this point, I don't see it happening. But it doesn't mean that things won't get so bad that it will happen. I believe that it will get so bad it will happen. But how bad it will be then, and will it shatter the world's governments and economies so that there is no technology, infrastructure left to put anything back together with? I don't know. I will say that in 1997, I had never thought of writing a book like When Technology Fails, never conceived of anything remotely like it. And at that point in time, I'd had a 20-year practice of prayer and meditation that I did most days, not fanatical. And often I would be like, when I was banging my head against the wall in a difficult engineering problem, I'd pray and meditate and ask for help, and pictures and solutions would come into my head.
Right.
Well, in 1997 at Thanksgiving, I prayed and meditated, and I just simply made a generic request for guidance and inspiration. And I got a bomb dropped in my lap. All of a sudden, into my head, with my eyes closed, I had this pictorial storyboard outline of moving pictures outlining this massive book project to help people live more sustainably and to help them plan with and deal with massive failures in central infrastructure all over the planet. And my first thought was like, no way. I mean, I don't know all this stuff. I can't do this. I'm an engineer, not an author. And Jesus calls it the still small voice, the little voice in my head. Call it the Holy Spirit, the guides, the masters, whatever you want to call it. It never told me exactly who it was. I believe it was a higher source. It said, nobody knows it all. And it assured me that I had the skills and talents that if I chose to take the assignment on, that I would get the inner and outer help I needed. Outer help meaning I dig up the experts and the resources I need to fill in the areas and the holes in my experience. And inner help meaning that that little voice would chime in now and then and guide me and direct me to areas that I needed to focus on that I was neglecting. And it took me about a year to decide it was a good idea and maybe I could do it, and about another year to write a proposal and find a small publisher to give me a modest advance, and then another year to rack up the credit cards and put my engineering business on hold and work 70 hours a week, 7 days a week, 70 hours a week, and finish it off. Now, I'm not looking forward to that day. They have never told me when it's going to happen or exactly how it's going to happen. And at the time I got this inspiration, realized .com was booming. Business couldn't be better in America. Real estate was booming. The second intifada had not started in the Middle East yet. It looked like the Palestinians and Israelis were going to come to a peaceful resolution. There was no ISIS. there was no, giant fundamentalist Muslim movement,
Right.
threatening the world. And I get this semi-apocalyptic project dumped in my lap. I mean, it was kind of like, are you crazy? Why you really want to do this project? Who's gonna buy this book? And you're spending all this time and borrowing against your home to do this project. And what if you're just crazy? I mean, it's pretty clear now that there's a lot of threats to our world that could do this. But back then it wasn't so clear.
We've got about a minute before I have to go for my final break, Matt. Let me ask you this question. Maybe you can ponder it over the next couple of minutes as we take our commercials. We've talked about the world being, in 20, 30 years, the cycles will kind of fade out. And, yes, we're going to have disasters. We're going to have strange weather. But can we humans survive that long with what's in store? Food for thought.
Well, it's a good question, and it's good food for thought. I don't know when that big event is going to come. And we could have a long, slow event with a lot of warning, or it could be a big event that happens like the snap of the fingers and the lights are out. And there's several that could do that. Snap of the fingers, or 1 week, 1 month, 6 months, and things have totally fallen apart.
All right, let's talk more when we come back from this commercial break. Matthew Stein is my special guest, X-Zone Nation, www.whentechfails.com. And we'll be back on the other side of this short commercial break from our broadcast center in Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. X-Zone Nation, our guest this hour is Matthew Stein, www.whentechfails.com. Two great books that I would certainly recommend each and every one of you having. The information in these books are invaluable. When Technology Fails and When Disaster Strikes. And Matthew, where are your books available?
Well, you can get them in many bookstores, and any bookstore can order them. You can buy an autographed copy at Matt Stein, MAT1TSTEIN.com, or you can pick them up Amazon, Barnes and Noble, any survival kind of outlets. But basically, any place books are sold, you can. If they don't have it, they can order it for you.
Matt, with all the homes that are now going with solar power, there's companies out there that say, we'll put the solar panels on your house. We're going to take the revenue from those solar panels for so long, and after that, you get to keep it. Coming up with power failures, is solar energy the answer to these long outages?
It's one answer. I think that solar energy is a great answer to reducing our carbon footprint and to making things more stable for your home. I have a trailer with a solar panel on it, and now that I've kind of renegotiated the loan on my house, and I went through the financial crash after borrowing and refinancing to start a construction business that went down with the crash. I was reluctant to invest in the house because it was worth, if I gave the house back to the bank, I'd be given my investment in panels. But I think that it is a good hedge against what's happening in the future. It's not everything. You could have electromagnetic pulse from a nuclear weapon or a solar storm that could cause problems. Solar storms will probably take down the grid. It's pretty certain to take down the grid in Canada and most of North America.
Yeah, we've seen it happen.
Most of the northern and southern states, southern countries in the world will experience long-term grid outage when the next giant solar storm happens. And they happen every 75 to 100 years, and the last one was 90 years ago, and the one before that was 60 years before that. And When you guys had a 1989 storm, it wiped out a big transformer in Quebec, knocked out power in the entire province of Quebec for much of a day. That knocked out one transformer. That storm was 1/10 as strong as the 1921 storm, and that was 50% weaker than the 1859 Carrington event. So what you're looking at is naturally occurring storms. They're not like clockwork. We can't tell you when the next one will happen. But the big ones are 10 times as strong as anything we've seen since we've had the modern grid with big, giant, extra high voltage transformers. They're extremely vulnerable to these big solar storms. And the solar storms we've had, like we had one in 2006 that was even weaker than the 89 storm, but longer in duration. And for some reason, it really nailed the grid in South Africa and knocked out 14 of these transformers. Now, the entire country of South Africa had to ration power for a year. Imagine going to work each day, and for 6 or 8 hours of your workday, 2 or 3 days a week, you had no power. No air conditioners, no elevators, no lights, nothing. And you couldn't buy a backup generator because they were all gone in the first 5 hours after that storm had happened and wiped out the power. Now, that was losing 14 transformers. The major solar storms we're talking about will lose like 350 plus in the United States, probably a couple thousand in the world. That's more than 10 years worth of manufacturing capacity in the world to replace those things. You're talking game over for life as we know it.
Matt, I want to thank you so much for joining us tonight, my friend. Always great talking to you. Once again, X-Zone Nation, Matthew Stein has been our guest this hour, www.whentechfails.com. I'll be back on the other side of this commercial break with the news at 10.5 minutes, 6.5 minutes past the top of the hour, as we continue here in the X-Zone with yours truly, Rob McConnell. Don't go away.